Well, welcome everybody. We're a couple of minutes early, but it seems like everybody's arrived already, so why don't we begin? So thank you all for coming to this workshop stroke discussion, stroke chat, whatever you want to call it. We appreciate your taking the time. We have an hour and a half, so plenty of time to really get stuck in. And I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion. Inside the machine, investigating AI and algorithms. Now, just at the offset, I'm very aware that the composition of the panel looks extremely male. It's certainly not by design. I'm not sure if that is a reflection on the nature of this work. I don't think it is. No?
No.
I mean, this panel does not reflect reality, right? Can we say that?
Most of the job is done by female colleagues. They just couldn't be here.
Okay, so for the record,
Yeah,
you could concur, yeah?
in our team also we are 3 members, and yeah, the one is missing is Evelyn Schott, a journalist from Netherlands. So
Okay.
yeah.
So a truly reflective panel would have at least 3, if not 4, if not even 5 women on this panel. So
Indeed.
let's take note of that, and this is not some sort of a statement about this. Okay, well, allow me to introduce myself as we kick off. I'm Timothy Large from the International Press Institute in Vienna, and I have the privilege of leading the Investigative Journalism for Europe program, IJ for EU, which basically supports cross-border investigative journalism in Europe. And we have seen increasingly more and more fantastic story ideas, proposals, requests for funding for stories around this kind of topic. AI, algorithms, this kind of fast-moving, fast-emerging technology that's having increasingly a worrying, shall we say, impact on our lives, as well as helping us in many different ways. I don't need to tell you that AI and algorithms are all around us all the time. They tell us what to buy, what to listen to, what to watch. And increasingly, authorities are using algorithms and AI to make decisions for us on our behalf, not with our permission, irregardless of our privacy concerns, about some really big deal kinds of issues. Issues such as, should people be allowed to immigrate? Are people likely to commit crimes, even if they haven't done so already? Should they be eligible for social benefits? These kinds of things that can really destroy lives. And of course, we all know that these algorithms are not perfect, or at least we suspect they're not perfect, because the truth is they're so opaque. The box, what's inside the machine, is often such a mystery that we don't really know what kind of prejudices and biases and flaws and faults are inside the machine. So the big question for today, and I hope our panel is going to help us answer this, is how do we as journalists, and I might add, how do we as journalists who are not particularly techie, we're not necessarily data scientists or, at the forefront of making algorithms and that kind of things. This is a mysterious subject matter for many of us. How do we peer inside the box, the black box of the algorithm, the mystical machine, and reverse engineer it, understand it, unpack it, get under the bonnet of it, and really try to understand it so we can see how fair is it? Can we ensure we have algorithmic accountability? Can we hold to account those who are making these things and, affecting many people's lives, often the most vulnerable? So we have some really fantastic journalists on the panel who have tried to do just that. And they're going to tell you a bit about their work, and I hope bring you on a journey that will inspire you to maybe get involved in this kind of reporting yourselves. Hopefully we'll all realize that it's not impossible, that it can be done, that you don't need to be some kind of incredible technical whiz to do it. So what I propose is, just to set the scene, we're going to hear just a few minutes from each of our panelists to tell us a little bit about specific work they've done in this area, and then we'll have a conversation. And I'd really love it if you would take part in this conversation. right from the beginning, please ask your questions, get involved. Let's have this as a real exchange. So I'll introduce you one by one, and you can just have your sort of 5 minutes just to set the scene so we know what we're talking about. So why don't we begin with Georgos here. Georgos is a Greek investigative journalist who is currently working on a fascinating investigation supported by IJ4EU. I'll let you tell about it.
Right.
Over to you.
Yes, my name is Georgos Christidis. I've been working for quite a while for foreign media on migration, mostly, and investigations. I got to admit, this was the first time that AI came up as part of our investigations, but I find it a really fascinating project. What our idea was, and would never have been implemented had we not had received the funding from what Tim said and other organizations, is to report all over the EU external borders, from the Evros River separating Greece from Turkey to the Aegean Islands, to the Balkan countries, all the way up to Calais and Britain, which is also in the news about, you know, all these small boats kind of things and all that. So migration being what it is now in Europe, a very a subject that divides opinion, and it's very toxic in many senses. We thought it vital to see how much AI has infiltrated those systems that affect people's lives, you know, be it from asylum decisions or anything else, you know, their rights, their personal rights, their private rights, and what is going on all over those Europes. So we have reporters. This is why I am only here, and all my colleagues are doing the actual work, so they're out on the field. And what we have found is quite ominous, if I could call it like that. So, for example, because our research will be published in November, I can't disclose too much. But in a nutshell, what we have found is like dozens of programs and lots of money being funneled into AI and smart border technologies. These range from detecting asylum seekers even before coming close to the EU border and stopping them beforehand. We have found data scrapping applications without any knowledge of the people involved. You know, in the West, we are all so very frustrated when there's a leak or any sense of our personal data being misused. But with asylum seekers, we can see like two-class citizens where nobody cares what happens to them. We see surveillance machines. We have witnessed them up close, even in camps that have been funded by the European Union, where there's very, very little respect about the rights and about even human decency. We have seen drones that have smart algorithms that can see and detect activities that are considered, potentially dangerous. We have seen accent tools being used in destination countries like Germany to determine whether an asylum seeker is indeed from, Athens or Crete, because they have like different accents, and then this can play a role in their application procedure. We have seen like a mind-blowing lack of transparency when it comes to how the systems work, who profits for them, what safeguards there are, if there's any way to put them to task. From our experience, it's been very, very difficult to actually get the companies or the public institutions to divulge more information. So all our work had to be done based on whistleblowers and on-the-field reporting and things that we could do. So we see like a reluctance from the state to be very transparent about this issue, which is like so important. And we also saw that in times of, shall we call it techno-solutionism, if that term exists, that somehow AI and all those clever machines can be, panacea, a cure for all, when in fact it actually isn't. So what we are very proud of doing is we have found actual cases of people who, because of artificial intelligence systems, have seen their rights being violated, including their asylum claims, which for me is quite atrocious. And we also found that training systems are opaque, algorithms are opaque. We don't know, for example, or we're looking into it, like what kind of parameters are used in the drones going up and monitoring people. How do they learn? How do they distinguish who's a smuggler, who's a vessel, who's an NGO worker, and stuff like this. And finally, what I found particularly egregious is that there's like two-class citizens, right? So you have the same camp on a Greek island, funded by the European Union, where Westerners can come and go without any biometrical data being shared, whereas if it's an asylum seeker, which by law is no crime, they're not being accused of anything, they undergo through a process that is very atrocious. They have their phones scrapped, they're confiscated, then scrapped. They're totally surveilled every single day of the week, even in places where they shouldn't have been. We have data about this. And this makes me really, really agitated and weary about what the things to come are. And just a final note, oh, sorry, I had a timer set, which I don't know how much time I still have left. Anyway, hopefully a minute.
We've got plenty of time, so.
And the thing is, like, this is not going anywhere. So all across Europe, there's more and more and more programs doing anything related to AI. There's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of research centers involved, and it's very clear that Europe does see artificial intelligence and smart borders as quite a very useful tool to stem migration flows into Europe, be that what it may. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And this is really alarming, some of the stuff you've just said there.
Right.
This tale of two Europes, one inside the European Union where hopefully our values and safeguards are in place, and then
right.
Complete Wild West on the doorstep. Do you get the impression that the developers of this technology are sort of using it under the guise of controlling migration, are using it on our doorstep in ways that could then sort of permeate and become normalized within Europe as well?
Yes, this is quite a risk. I don't know when, but for example now, if anyone asked you, let's say if someone came to you and said, I'm the police, hand me over your telephone, your password, and I will bring it back to you in 3 days, right? You wouldn't do it, would you? Like, I don't know anyone in the audience if they would do it. But still, asylum seekers will do it, you know? This raises a whole bunch of questions. This is not perhaps the best the venue to go into this. But things that we do consider now that we are protected, we're still very weary about technologies and how much Facebook listens to us or what kind of ads come to our social media apps. But imagine if someone had total access to your phone, to your photos, to, there is a very opaque system of where this data is stored, where it is being disseminated, for what reason, and all that. So I wouldn't be surprised if at some point someone, very clever person says, wow, that's a good idea if we expanded the scope of this sort of, machines.
Okay, well, thank you for setting the scene there. Let's put a pin in that investigation. We'll come back to it, no doubt. The other investigation we have is actually, we have two people here who are going to represent that, Pablo and Pierluigi, a Spanish journalist. Pablo is a Spanish investigative journalist, and Pierluigi is are you based in Sicily? Italian? Yeah. Italian journalist who are both working with a wider team on an investigation called Decision Machines, very much like the title of this, this session. This is about, well, you'll tell us, but this is about AI algorithms in the criminal justice system. Also very worrying, I find it. Pablo, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tim, for the presentation. We had okay, this is George's presentation. I will go through it, if that's fine. Okay. Okay, I think they are, yeah. I mean, it's a really simple one, so that's, yeah. So, yeah, as Tim was saying, we are here, myself and Pierluigi, we are part of a team of journalists that we are working a project called Decision Machines. That is a project that was born in December 2023, and that mainly explores how governments in 3 specific EU countries, Spain, Italy, and the Netherlands, use predictive algorithms in very sensitive areas from a human rights perspective, such as courts, prisons, and police stations. Well, so far the project has received support from Journalist Fund and IJ4U. And as Tim was saying, today we are here on the stage, 2 of us. One of the members is missing, Evelyn Schott from the Netherlands, who is investigating the use of a software to assess the recidivism risk among youth delinquents in the Netherlands. Pierluigi will explain later on a bit what he's been digging into. And myself, I will talk very briefly about an algorithm that is used in the prisons of Catalonia in Spain. Okay, so yeah, I will do a really brief presentation because this is, well, different case to what Giorgio just explained. I mean, this is a story that has been already published last April in an Spanish outlet called El Confidencial. So mainly, Riscambi is the name. Is a risk assessment algorithm that tries to predict using multiple factors, several potential risks. The main one, and in which my investigation is mainly based, is the risk that an inmate will reoffend using violence when he or she leaves the prison. So mainly, to give you an idea, I mean, the score given by the algorithm is used in several areas. Mainly, inside the prison, is used to make decisions about the inmate, in terms of treatment, rehab programs, and so on. But also is used, this score, this number, is used also outside the prison by judges and prosecutors to decide whether to give a parole or a permission to the inmate. So just a couple of notes of context that I think that is relevant. I mean, Riscambi is not a unique case in the world at all. Risk assessment algorithms are used in prisons and judicial systems in many countries, and in fact, this one that I investigated, Riscambi, has been in use for 15 years in Catalonia. So what is new? I mean, what we were able to put into the table with this investigation. Basically, we were able to recreate how the algorithm works, the inner workings of this software, and to explain them also, which is very relevant. I mean, I think that when you report on these kind of topics, it's not only to get the right technical materials, the right knowledge about how these systems work, but also find a way to explain it in a clear manner to a general audience. For instance, I mean, this story was published in El Confidencial, which is an outlet for a general audience. I mean, it's not specialized on tech. So I think that one of the main goals that probably we will be talking about this during the panel is being able to explain this kind of things to someone that knows nothing about these kind of tools. So yeah, basically, and we were able to do this because I personally gained access to exclusive technical materials of the algorithms. Mainly, just to give you a sneak peek, is, well, the weights of every risk factor that the algorithm is using. I did this using a freedom of information request, which is something that also will come well, during the conversation. But at the same time, and I think that that's the strength also of this investigation, we portrayed using real cases of real inmates, what kind of consequences and influence the risk score given by the algorithm has in the inmates' lives and rights. We did so basically through curated human interest stories of real inmates that were assessed by the software. Finally, yeah, thanks to interviews with lawyers and experts and going through multiple court orders, we were also able to prove how Riscambi's outcomes play a crucial role in the decisions taken by prosecutors and judges about paroles and other permissions. There's a problem here. These actors, they have not the necessary context to understand what Riscambi risk score means. I mean, they basically take this piece of information as something scientific and completely unbiased, which is not true, because the risk factors used by Riscambi are mainly the characteristics of every inmate and include many items closely connect with the socioeconomic background of the inmates. So, yeah, just few takeaways that we can go into detail later. I think that with this kind of reporting is really important to get inspired. In my case, when I had the materials and the information I needed, I looked into one of the stories published in the Suspicion Machines project that Daniel will talk about later, specifically one that was published in Le Monde in France. And I have to thank Gabriel Geiger and Justin Casimir from Lighthouse, who helped me to shape a little bit how I wanted to explain this story, right? Also, collaborate. I mean, I'm a full-time freelancer. When I had like all the materials, all the information that I needed, basically I pitched the story to El Confidencial. I had already previously worked with them, but yeah, basically, I mean, they did a terrific job doing like a specific design. This is one example. Yeah, specific design and specific graphics and visualizations on how the algorithm works itself. I think that is, and this connects with what I said before about being able to explain this in a clear manner. We basically take one real case as the one that is shown in the screen, Jesus, his real name, a real inmate that was in prison in Catalonia for several years. And we basically recreated how the algorithm gave him a specific score and how changing the different risk factors, the score given was changing. So I think that there is this, in this kind of reporting also it's really important to find a way to explain clearly and the issues that we are talking about. And also talking as a freelancer, I mean, I think that is, as in any other bit, I think that when you report on AI and algorithmic accountability studies, I mean, combine and make the most of your skills. I mean, I personally, I think that I'm quite used to find good human studies and to explain through them the topics that I'm covering. So basically, in this investigation, I combine that skill with freedom of information requests, FOIA skills, which I've been doing for now 2-3 years in Spain, which is also kind of a difficult context for FOIAing. I mean, it's quite different to how it works in Central North European countries. So yeah, I mean, just put in the table everything that you make the best, and I think that way you can build this kind of investigations.
Thanks, Pablo. And just before we get on to you, Pierluigi, can you kind of make it a little concrete for us? This gentleman here, for example, how does the score generated for him, how might it actually affect his future? Like, what might happen to him if they get it wrong? Would he be denied parole? What sort of impact could it have on his life?
Yeah, Tim. So yeah, basically what you just mentioned and what I said before. I mean, Riscambi's outcome, which is mainly it's basically a number, a number with that then goes through certain thresholds, and it gives to every inmate low, medium, or high recidivism risk. So depending on that score, the life of Jesus in this case can change quite a lot. I mean, while he's in prison, I mean, it really changes on how professionals at work within the prisons treat him in terms of rehab programs, therapies, activities that they do in the prisons, the focus that they put in order to, in Spain as in many other countries, I mean, the main goal of the prisons is the social rehabilitation of the inmates. So the way this is done is influenced by Riscambi. But in my opinion, and what is most worrying is the way Riscambi's outcomes are used outside the prison. Because inside prison, the professionals are capable to give context to the number given by Riscambi. But outside, the judges, the prosecutors, they basically receive, I mean, they get in their court, I mean, their documents that they receive from prisons. This guy got a high risk of recidivism, or a low one, or a medium one. And that's a piece of information that really influences the decision that they take about the life of the inmate that they are assessing, in terms of giving a permission to leave the prison for a few days, giving a parole. So yeah, and that was the case with Jesus, for example. I mean, he had like a high risk score for years due to several factors that we explain in the piece, and that made very difficult for him to get any kind of permission, any kind of parole.
Thank you. It's very, very worrying, I think. Pierluigi, you've had a different sort of angle on this same investigation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Hello, everyone. I'm Pierluigi Bizzini. Very happy to be here. I'm a freelance journalist from Sicily, Italy, and a member of Fada Collective. It's a freelance journalist freelance collective from Italy, and we are here if you want to have a talk after the panel. And okay, so I'm working with Pablo and Evelyn, and it's a very complex investigation, I would say. first of all, the first idea of starting working on predictive police, that this is the main topic of my investigation, predictive police software's use in Italy, came from my experience as a fellow reporter with Algorithm Watch. That was, let's say, my first taste on those sort of topics, and it's the moment where I, became aware about the importance of investigate and focusing a lot on those systems, because I noticed that in Europe in the last 2-3 years, let's say, I'm as a reader, first of all, I noticed that plenty of stories have been published in systems in the different countries, AI systems used in several contexts like criminal justice, welfare, migration, for instance. And I asked myself, okay, what's going on in Italy? And I stumbled upon, I remember this software, this company that is called Keycrime, that actually is one of the, I would say, oldest experimentation of predictive police experimentation in all Europe. Because the first experimentation started in 2008, if I'm not wrong, yes, 2008. And it's a predictive police tool that has been used mainly in the Milano area, so in the north of Italy, Lombardia, and has been used until now. I have to say until now because now the company is in liquidation, fortunately, less fortunately for my story probably, but and that's an interesting, that was the starting point, because from that experience, several other predictive police companies and experimentation start. We have in Italy X-Law that is used, it's very well spread in all Italy. It's used in Napoli, for instance, also in some little towns in the north of Italy, but very small towns, and that's quite creepy in a way. And Vigilium. Vigilium is also another interesting project that is a consortium that has been, created by a consortium of University of Trento foundations, Fondazione Bruno Kessler, and some private companies. So the investigation, I mentioned earlier that the investigation is quite complex, because when we are talking about police, we are like facing against a huge wall, and it's a very time-consuming investigation, I would say, and the findings are interesting, at the moment. So a first story is not still published yet, so you cannot read it, but it's going to be published next week, very likely, in Algorithm Watch website. And it's going to be a series of 3 stories. So each story is about one of those 3 systems I mentioned. So about Keycrime, for instance, Keycrime has been developed by a police officer, Mario Venturi. He's such a character. He was a police officer. He was working in the street, so he was not a high-level, top-ranked policeman in Milano. And I had the chance to have some chat with him, and it's actually this interesting story that he told me that he noticed working in the street some patterns, recurring patterns on some criminal acts, mostly robberies, and by himself, he decided to develop with a little team of his colleagues. I would not even say a AI machine learning application, because this is like quite too much. But at first was mostly like, okay, let's systematize our interview process as police toward the victims of those crimes. So that's something very important about this story, because what the Milano police did is actually create a a unique way to interview the victims. So that means systematize the questions, asking the same questions to all the people, to all the victims. So that means at what time was it happened, the criminal event, in which area, if the criminal has the color of his skin or the aspect, height, so some biographical data. So this is very interesting, but extremely hard to receive such, like to acquire such information, because I must say that in our case in Italy, the FOIA requests are not very helpful, unfortunately, for several reasons, because we don't receive any answer, or we receive answer after 2 months, 3 months after, checking, like, please answer to us, and then the answer is negative for security reasons, mostly. So we are. I mean, I'm trying. We are trying different approaches. So the idea of this investigation is trying to, okay, let's talk about these predictive police technologies. They are here. They are used, and key crime in this case is it led the diffusion of those technologies, and then let's keep going, building up alliances, because this is one of the main issue and also challenge in a good way about the story, because if you are going to approach, this is like a suggestion, if you are going to approach on those sort of stories, I think it's very helpful building up alliances, not just with team journalists, but also organizations that are working on privacy, for instance, or they focus and they pay a lot of attention maybe on criminal justice, because they are going to be your first allies, partners. And now I can feel that, I mean, I started the investigation, alone, let's say, in Italy, but now I feel much more comfortable working on that. It's going to be a very long investigation, very likely. And now I see that it's very urgent to focus on predictive police, algorithms, because even though the key crime has been, they fail as a company. They fail because of, like what they say to the media, it was because of the AI Act, the Artificial Intelligence Act, that it should kind of stop in a way, or like put a sort of ban to predictive police technologies, but there are a lot of loopholes in the AI Act, so it's not really true, I would say. So that was the main argument of the company. Instead, this is something very interesting. The company had a lot of, it was broken, like financially, also because the pandemic really did a lot of, 2020 was, for startup companies, was a very tough year. And if you read the history, the financial history of the company was very weak already. So this is also something interesting to, especially in Italy, I would say, like taking notes of how the health of those companies, because there is also a lot of hype, I would say, in those technologies. As Pablo, Georgos, and Daniel will talk about it, those technologies are real, and that the people are like affected by those technologies, they exist. And but also I'm noticing, working on those topics, that there is also quite hype, especially the company are trying, startup companies are trying to follow this AI hype and building up very random technologies that some of them are not really working, but it's worth it to analyze them, and it's worth it to understand how they work. And just like a technical side about key crime, how it works, because it's very interesting. It's a bit different than other AI predictive police technologies. Usually the predictive police technologies use this sort of, they call it hotspot analysis. It's like they do statistics on neighborhoods or specific neighborhoods. They studies like they do assumptions about some like geographical data of criminal events that appear in some specific neighborhoods. So the idea is, okay, so if these those numbers suggest to us that very likely in this specific area some crime events will appear, so let's put some more police there. The hotspot analysis, that is the crime linking technology that has been used by Key Crime, is a bit different, and it's more like a Tinder match because it's they are like collecting a lot of interviews, and when there is an event in a specific area, and when the interview is taken after this crime event, they see, oh, we have an interview that is very similar in our previous database and recordings. And the idea, it's a match, actually. So if we have all these recordings that they are very similar, so very likely that guy of that criminal group is doing criminal events again in that specific neighborhood. The thing is that we don't know when the interview is took, because this is a relevant information, because if the interview is provided immediately after the event, the criminal event, I mean, it could be very biased, I will say, because the victim is probably in shock, is very stressful, so the informations are not very reliable. So the investigation is still going on. I mean, it's not done yet, so I'm very aware that there is a lot of work to do, but also I'm very confident. And this is a starting point, I would say. Especially in Italy, there is not much literature on those topics. Now some medias, like I will mention IRPI Media is working quite well. It's an Italian media outlet, is working quite well on, has a like little team working on specifically on those topics. And this is good for us because there is room of improvement. There are plenty of stories out there. And the predictive police is, I mean, it's something because, and I will stop it, the Italian government was very interested by those experimentation, and during 2021, if I'm not wrong, the Italian government started like a sort of survey in order to, like a sort of experimentation that has been called Project Jove, Jupiter, in order to implement predictive police in all Italy, so not just, so as a practices, national practices. Now it seems to be not really going on. We are trying to understand why and how. But yes, that's it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, let's go to Daniel now. Daniel is the founder of Lighthouse Reports, lives here in Athens. Yeah, let's get that clicker there. And Lighthouse Reports does incredible cross-border work. And this particular investigation, Suspicion Machine, I think was really groundbreaking, really cutting edge. So please, just give us a flavor of what this was about so we can drill down a bit.
Thanks, Tim. And it's good to be here with the other panelists as well. What you can see up on the screen was the end of a 2-year journey into trying to conduct essentially a comprehensive taking apart of an algorithm used by a public authority to make decisions that would have big impact in the lives of ordinary people. And I think it's important to kind of to say what our starting point here was. We were trying to do something that hadn't been done, at least in a European context before. And we were trying to do it in a way that would make it possible for people to come afterwards and then to build on that work. So in the case of suspicion machines, we had also cycled through looking at criminal justice systems. We'd looked at systems that have been used in prisons similar to Pablo. We had looked at youth reoffending. In each instance, we basically found a completely closed door and no route to the kind of information that we would need. We alighted on welfare systems. Now, welfare systems are exactly the kind of territory where you're going to find AI solutions being deployed. You've got very vulnerable people. You have political energy behind the adoption of technological solutions to rooting out real and imagined wrongdoing by that community. And you have a complete imbalance of power. So in this instance, what you can see up on the screen is one of 4 stories that we worked on with Wired magazine. And it took apart an algorithm in the Dutch port city of Rotterdam. I'm going to move on a slide because I think it would be good to leave a little bit of time for questions and other things, so I'll be a little bit brief here. Until 2017, welfare fraud and welfare fraud detection was something that was essentially done by individuals and going through files. Until 2017, that was when an algorithm that was sold to Rotterdam by Accenture, a global consulting group, was deployed. Now, that algorithm was essentially going to flag people who, according to a series of inputs and variables, that this would then be flagged as high risk. So it's a risk scoring algorithm. And that would then lead to a series of pretty dire consequences in people's lives. The Netherlands is not unusual in so much as there are very broad sweeping powers for fraud detection. Investigators, they have powers that even go beyond the police. Being flagged can mean losing your right to welfare, losing the ability to make rent, losing access to payments that put food on the table for your children. It can have an immediate impact. And remember, you're just being flagged because the machine has decided that according to your profile, you may be guilty of fraud and you're going to come under investigation. But the consequences of that investigation are immediate. So the main subject of our story was a Moroccan-born mother of 2 who came under repeat investigations. She was investigated again and again, and each time was found to have no wrongdoing, but every single one of these investigations, every time she was flagged, it had drastic impact on her own life. So let's have a look at a little bit how it works. So here, in 2017, something changes, and the city begins to use this Accenture machine, which it adapted. They had 315 inputs or questions that they asked you in data collection. And some of those things were things that you were asked directly. Other things were subjective remarks that were made. So whether or not you were wearing makeup when you met with a social security case study officer was in there alongside. So essentially subjective observations were in there. And then if you came on the wrong side of that red line you saw on that graph, you were categorized as high risk and you would be flagged. So let's have a look at some of the things that drove up your risk score. So being female, having children, not knowing Dutch. Just let that one repeat itself quickly. What we're talking about here is a relatively sophisticated algorithmic system. So we deliberately wanted to tackle something that was close to an advanced version. The reality, as I'll explain quickly, is that very often these were far more basic machine learning models than this one were being used to make major decisions about people's lives. To kind of cut to the chase, we discovered serious discrimination based on ethnicity, based on gender, based on age, There are two ways really to look at the outcome of an investigation into an algorithm. One is, does it perform? Does it do what it's meant to do? And with what level of accuracy can it achieve these results? And the second thing is bias or disparate impact. Does it unfairly impact on particular communities? Well, in the case of Rotterdam, it was both. Essentially, this elaborate system that was sold was little more than a random guessing machine. But it did, despite that fact, manage to have extreme disparate impacts on one of the most diverse cities in the Netherlands. As a result of this investigation, the Rotterdam city authorities issued a statement and said that cities all over the world should subject themselves to the same level of scrutiny, which for us was a major outcome. It helped in the act of building a community of journalists around Europe who wanted to follow up and look into systems in their own contexts. And it's great to be sharing a panel with some of the people who we came to know and came to work with as a consequence of this. Rotterdam scrapped all plans to update that algorithm, and it's had a major impact on discussions around the use of algorithms in the Netherlands, which has been essentially a hotbed of activity around this topic. I'm happy to talk further about what happened with it. I'd just like to point out there's a couple of follow-up stories here and make a point about scale when it comes to welfare surveillance and AI systems. On the left, sorry, let's check how much, yeah, it is on the left. You see an investigation we worked on with Le Monde. That was into a social security system that has risk scored more than half the population of France and had never been properly investigated before, had never been subject to an independent investigation from someone outside of the French social security system. Pablo's already explained about risk Canvey. We have another investigation from the Suspicion Machines family coming out in Sweden. And maybe this is an area to kind of set up for further conversation. But we're talking about some of the societies which have highest transparency scores, that have freedom of information laws, and yet can be among the least transparent imaginable. Sweden routinely comes top of all transparency indexes. The Swedish Social Security Agency felt entitled to completely stonewall us for over a year and a half, refused to answer any questions about it. And we actually had to make a breakthrough by discovering that they had been the subject of an audit by an official Swedish auditing organization that strongly criticized them, and they promptly ignored that watchdog criticism. But then we fired the watchdog, and the watchdog gave us the data set underpinning it that the Swedish Social Security Agency had refused to give us. So I don't think there's no room for complacency in this, but I look forward to having a conversation about what kinds of investigations can be done, what you need to ask for, and which kinds of reporters and journalists can work on this. And I think I'd also like to talk about something that didn't go well, or didn't go as well as we would have liked as well, but I'd be curious to hear from the others, which was, we worked with Wired. We had our own team that gradually came to understand how to do this and design this in a way that we could share with others afterwards. And we worked with in Rotterdam with a Metro newsroom, Vesperton, which did a really good job of helping us to do the community level reporting here. But how do you get this reporting? Because fundamentally we're talking about abuses of power and massive asymmetry between vulnerable individuals and state authorities, city authorities, and large technology and consulting companies. So under those circumstances, how can you get the results of this work into the hands of the communities who are most affected? How can you put them in a position to understand what's been done and have some agency in in pushing back against this. So I'd be happy in the next round, without monopolizing now, to maybe talk a little bit about that experience as well, because I think each of those things are fundamental to this discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. That is a great question, and let's pick up on that in just a second. I do want to open this up to everybody from now. We have about half an hour left, so please do put you're going to have to wave your arms and shout, because it's very hard to see. All right, so we're going to come back to that question, Daniel, that you put there. It's a really good one, but I do see a question down here in the front. Let's get the microphone.
So it almost doesn't matter how these algorithms are created, because what is important is their impact and their application and so forth, which you all have been talking about. But I am wondering if there are useful things to know about the creation, for example, in the predictive policing. You mentioned the hotspots and the officers themselves who sort of came up with something. But I have to think that data scientists are involved in creating these algorithms employed by companies, at universities, whatever it is. So is that something you can shed some light on? Who are putting these things together, these guessing machines?
Brian.
Can I say something about this? I mean, we are in the European Union, right? So this is EU taxpayers' money, and they're being channeled into all those programs. And the level of transparency is very, very, very little. You know, I find this really frustrating, to be honest. We have been denied. I mean, we did do what we had to do, but still, but officially, we had been denied by anyone to explain to us about what is exactly they're doing, if they're following standards, you know, what safeguards are in place, and everything. I don't want to. I said it. I don't want to be. I don't want us to appear some sort of technophobes or whatever. There could be beneficial uses of these kinds of systems, but in the way that they are currently being employed. The only things that we could find out is like it's against the people on the move, and I think that's not by coincidence. It is part of the fact that the European Union has decided that you know we're not taking any more people. I don't know if I'm asking your question, but or was it something else you asked? Or?
I had something else in mind.
Sorry.
I mean, I worry about one problem is if the police are doing it themselves, that introduces a certain kind of error.
Yes, this is kind of, it's
For
not kind of
obvious
ad hoc.
Yes, yes.
It's
but
really,
if the
yeah.
universities are doing it, that's another kind of error, because they're also, you know, distant from the situation, and they're very confident. So everywhere you look in terms of creating them, there's opportunity for distortion, mistakes, whatever, as if we even knew what the truth would look like if you could put together such an algorithm. So I was interested in what you knew about who is contributing to the construction of the algorithms. And then there's room at each layer. There's a problem of application, of interpretation, all that kind of stuff. But I was interested in the source. I mean, AI itself could construct the algorithms, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I think that we should make also a difference between like different kind of systems and different kind of uses. I mean, in terms of predictive policing, for example, I mean, many authors, I mean, that's call it like pseudoscience. I mean, has been debunked by many scholars, by many researchers. I mean, basically, that's the idea of predictive policing, the idea of feeding a machine with the data about where more crimes are committed in a city, in a neighborhood, in a region. Basically, what it does is it's not going to solve any problem. I mean, basically, the machine is going to give you outcomes saying that that you have to send more police cars to those neighborhoods, and that's just like rolling. So that's, for example, I mean, predictive policing is something, for example, that Pierluigi is investigating in Italy, but there are plenty of authors that basically have debunked that, like any kind of utility, or so that's pretty different, for example, to a system like the one that I investigated, which is a risk assess methodology, which is used in many different countries of the world. The thing is how it is used and with which requirements, and so I think that there is a lot of, sorry for the word, but bullshit about how these machines are built. But there is also, I mean, some really good data scientists that do good things. I mean, the thing is, for what do you use also? I mean, Daniel's, suspicion machines project is a perfect example of how important is the context and the kind of use that you will give to the machine, right? I mean, basically, to punish the poor, to flag them. So I think that it's important to make differences between.
We have a question in the front. Just before we get to that, really quickly, Daniel, did you get a sense of who was behind the decisions, like if a woman wears makeup to the interview, that makes her higher risk? Those kinds of seemingly ridiculous, logical things that are built into the machine. Did you get a sense of who was making those decisions?
So that specific field was essentially subjective remarks that were made by caseworkers. Now, the machine receives that essentially in a binary form. The case maker made a remark, or they didn't make a remark. It's a 1 or a 0. I think it's really easy to get super confused at this point because we're talking about a lot of different things. But essentially, the kinds of systems that Pablo's been talking about, I've been talking about, the quality of the decisions that are going to be made by those is primarily determined by the training data. The logic of the training data is if you look closely enough at what has previously happened, you will discern patterns. And based on those patterns, you will be able to, within a margin of error, predict what happens in the same scenario in the future. Now, the level of sophistication on that, it depends on how many different data fields you bring in, and then how well the model is constructed in order to take those data points based on the previous training, weight those different data points, and then give you an output. Other systems we're talking about, like police hotspot, etc., are essentially different kinds of systems. They're fundamentally doing the same thing because it happened here in the past, location-based, then it will happen here again in the future. On the point of who makes these, there are small private startups, there are very large consultancy companies who source that technology from multiple sources and then are very well placed to sell that into public services because that's what they do. There are also good examples from Germany where individual police departments at a state level have developed solutions in-house. There are very large technology companies that do a great job of appearing scary and then use that as a marketing, like Palantir, and then use that as a marketing tool to appear all-knowing. There are any number of different actors in this space, and there are potentially, as Pablo says, very legitimate uses for these technologies. And that's basically just a series of categories of risk assessment algorithms. I mean, the broader question of AI beyond that, most people by now are talking about large language models, and that's a whole other area of discussion.
Right. Sorry to keep you waiting in the front there.
So hi, my name is Yassin Irshad. I work for the Robert Bosch Foundation, and we work on technologies and the impact in the migration space. And my question would be to kind of all of you, you touched upon it, on the issues of accessing the algorithms, the data, and getting access to the systems, and also the collaborations that you're in. And we are asking ourselves kind of how a oversight regime could look like, so that not afterwards, after these systems are implemented, we find out that they are not really working, but in the beginning, how can they be audited? How can, what should actors look like that audit them? Is it a state agency or is it a civil society organization? And in the migration space, there's often the questions around national security exemptions and these types of issues. And I would be interested in your perspectives on your roles as journalists, but also how the entire oversight regime could look like and the ways of accessing the algorithms and their performance and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to tackle that one, issue of oversight? Who audits?
Me. Yeah. Could you just put it in a nutshell again, like a more succinct kind of? Yeah. So. Yeah. The goal is listen. I'll be very truthful to you. So for example, if you go to a camp on a Greek island where they accept asylum seekers, right? And they immediately get their phones scrubbed, they get fingerprinted, they get biometrical data that nobody knows how they're being used, how long are they being stored, who are they being disseminated to, who can use them for how long, etc., etc. And on top of that, they consent to it. It's not something that's, most of the time, it's not something like that. They think it's a good thing that they're doing, because, they come to this country, you have this huge imbalance of power, you know that if I don't collaborate, then I'm kind of fucked, So it's very, very, very easily, but this is something that if you consider yourself being in a similar situation, I mean, we are so very, sensitive about our data and stuff like that, because we're afraid about anything, even Facebook ads can be something that can be, consumed like hours on end of beer drinking in Athens, So, but these people who have so little, who are so vulnerable, etc., the fact that they just get stripped out of their phones, out of the things, they might have photos of them with her girlfriend or whatever and stuff like this. I find this horrendous. And this is not being regulated. And nobody, for me, this is a huge problem. Nobody knows for how long they're stored, where they're being shared with whom they're being shared with, what are they being used thereafter, etc. And this is all hidden behind an excruciating web of EU-funded agencies and stuff like that.
So do you see the role of journalists to sound the alarm on this, to let everybody know this is going on?
Yes, because
but then who should be, after that is done, who should be monitoring and auditing?
Yes, I mean, our goal is to, because we really aspire to change and in any way we can, to say, listen guys, you paid millions of euros, tens of millions of euros to build those camps at the best standards everywhere, right? And this is what's happening right under your nose. We know that you know about this. And for years you haven't done anything, People should be held accountable about what's going on, about people's rights.
Right.
I'm not sure anything changes because journalism is up to a point,
Daniel?
Yeah.
I think if I understood the question correctly, is what would an oversight structure look like? So give you the example of a parole system in the UK. The UK has a system called Oasis. It's been functioning for the better part of 20 years, and it's been evolving in different forms. The only audits of that system are done by essentially government-appointed panels. So academics are brought in to devise a methodology and to test that system. Now, the results of that test are made public at an incredibly superficial level. The people who conduct those tests have to sign NDAs, so they have to commit to not circulating that information in any usable form. And the underlying data sets are completely inaccessible. So superficially, you have a form of oversight. You have independent monitors who come in and run a series of performance tests, the design of which we don't have any insight into, So you basically just get a tick. Fundamentally, what you got is we tested ourselves and tick. I think the closest that we've had to, I'm conscious that there are people in the audience who will have spent more time on this maybe than any of us even on the panel. So I won't say too much about the EU AI Act for fear of what they'll say to me afterwards. But what I would say is that even in an environment that where you're designing, where the regulation that you're designing is basically is attempting to set a kind of model for the rest of the world, what you had in reality at the last minute was a giant series of carve-outs and negotiations around national security, policing, so essentially all of the most sensitive areas where the greatest degree of oversight would have been necessary were exactly the areas where we essentially said, okay, well, the rules apply over here, but there are going to be no rules over here. So given that the design of oversight bodies is going in most cases to be flawed, I would argue that there will always be a role for journalism in this instance, and it's the job of journalists and the job of organizations like Lighthouse to get us ready to be actually able to play that role. How do we devise and then distribute strategies for breaking through or going around roadblocks for access to information? How do we make sure that access for information laws are used often and well enough that muscle doesn't atrophy and it continues to be there? How do we make sure that organizations that fund and support public interest journalism understand that role, understand the necessity of journalists being there to backstop all other public institutions? And how do we persuade journalists that it's their role? What I talked about at the beginning of this was essentially quite a technical investigation. It was very ambitious. But there are lots of other forms of AI accountability reporting that can be done that don't require that you have a data scientist on your team in order to do them, which is a good time to mention that if you've done those things and you've taken it up to a point where you do need help, then Lighthouse and other organizations like us are really happy to hear from you and to potentially work with you or help you solve problems or access resources or connect to others who can do that kind of thing. But ultimately, whatever kind of oversight body is created, and that will be very different depending on the kinds of topics we're talking about, there does need to be public interest journalism that is willing to and understands how to backstop that.
Yeah, can I just answer about this? So in Greece, there is this data protection agency. They imposed a fine, the largest ever in their history, on the migration ministry because they didn't even have an assessment about fundamental rights, when private protection at the EU-funded camps, right? I'm not sure if they've addressed this problem. I kind of doubt it. But also, journalists are like persona non grata there. I don't remember when the last journalist has ever visited those facilities, for example. So yeah, there's a lot of scope for journalists to do that kind of accountability stuff. Yeah.
Very quickly, I want to add something. As a role as a journalist, and in this case as a freelance journalist, I mean, something we are discussing a lot between us and my collective, for instance, and my colleagues, it's also our job doesn't stop with publication, right? So those issues are very complex, it's very complicated, right? And it's not easy. I mean, we are talking between professionals, so in a way we can kind of understand each other, but this sort of moment must be spread, in my case in Italy, in all the communities, big cities, little towns. I mean, our role is not just, also in the dissemination of our stories in order to how to say, to trigger awareness among communities and people, because with our votes and with our decisions, we can really change our institutions and the people that are investing money on those technologies. I mean, this kind of sounds a little bit utopian maybe, but I think our role is investigate, being watchdog, report, tell stories, but also that we shouldn't stop on our publication. So we need, and we need resources for doing that. We need to create alliances among different type of media partners, but not just media partners, foundations, for instance, organizations, communities-based organizations and associations. And I think that this is very, very important. So I see myself as a vector, not just as a journalist, like vector of change in a way, if it sounds well, I don't know. But yeah, that's the idea, I would say.
In a way, you've touched a little bit on the point that Daniel raised earlier about the challenge of getting this knowledge, this insight into the hands of the affected communities as well, so that they're empowered to do something. Perhaps we could talk a little bit more about that. Just want to give you a chance to ask any more questions. Yes, okay, so we've got a hand up here and a hand here. Let's go to you first, and then we'll come to you.
Sorry, I was asked to stand up. First of all, thank you for this panel. It was incredibly interesting. The second question, well, my question actually is, I come from South America. One of our biggest NGOs there, it's called Un Techo para Mi País, and what they do essentially is build houses for people in need. And in the region, there's a lot of people under the poverty line that could really use a house, per se. And I know that their way of choosing who gets a house and who doesn't, because they can't just build for everyone, is using an algorithm. So I guess my question is, do you guys think that there is a gray area where algorithms can be used for something positive, and if so, in what way? And to what extent do you think that the bias of the algorithm could be either bigger or, well, weaker than the bias of a person? Does that make sense? Did that just make sense? I think it did, right? Okay.
It makes sense, yeah.
Thanks.
Anybody want to take that? Yeah. Pablo?
Yeah, that's a big discussion, like about this. Who is more? I mean, we as humans are biased, and algorithms are too. And I think that yeah, it really depends on the context and the purpose of the system that you are developing and that you are implementing. I mean, the four of us, we've been talking about systems that are used basically affecting vulnerable population that in many cases, and I think that Suspicion Machines project really covers this very well. I mean, even as a test ground. So yeah, I think that there can be room for algorithms to be used in a much fair way and responsible. But I mean, for sure, there have to be like some things in mind. I mean, first, I mean, the level of transparency has to be much higher than, I mean, all the examples that we've been through here is, I mean, how opacity is, I mean, it's overwhelming. It doesn't matter, I mean, and we are talking about public authorities that are implementing these systems with public funds. So there have to be like more eyes into how these algorithms work. And also, and this is something that like, yeah, is a lot of data ethicists and data scientists that I talk with, this idea of, I mean, AI and algorithms work when you have really good data. And the bigger is the size of the database that you have, it's going to be more, probably it's going to cause like more problems. I mean, I think that like an algorithm and an AI is as good as the database in which it's based is, right? So yeah, I don't know if this answers your question, but Yeah, and just small note, I mean, South America, for example, is an area where this kind of reporting is still, I think that has a lot of room to expand, and yeah, and it would be super interesting to know about this system that you mentioned.
Okay, I think we have time just to get, Daniel, a quick take on that last question, if you like, and then we'll get one more question in, I think.
There are legitimate use cases for algorithms, for machine learning models. It can't just be the job of journalism to beat up on shitty algorithms and like basic systems deployed completely inappropriately. As journalists, we're trying to build a case for transparency, and there has to be some balance in our reporting between jumping up and down on systems which are clearly not in any way fit for purpose. There are big ethical discussions to be had. There are many people who would argue against the deployment of any social scoring systems, for instance. But we will also have to tell more nuanced stories and be prepared to engage and make the argument to publics, to editors, to invest in examinations of legitimate efforts at ethical AI. Otherwise, there will be basically two groups of people yelling at each other across an ideological divide.
Okay, I think we had a question in the middle. Yes. Let's get the microphone up there, please.
Hi, I just had a quick question about if you have any advice or tips for investigating AI and algorithm use by private companies when public records might not be available.
Private companies when public info is not available. Any tips?
So a very quick suggestion could be try to catch up with some people that have been fired by the company.
There are great examples out there. Go and look at the best stuff that's been done. Go and look at what the markup did in understanding how internet service providers across the US were failing to provide for marginalized communities. Look, there are tons of really good examples of how you can essentially map disparate impact of private companies' products, so you can work that way around. LinkedIn is your friend. If you want to go and look into a private company, then go and find people who worked there more recently. I mean, the difficulty with that kind of work is that you really need to build up a picture of what's really been going on and show some understanding. If you're going to do confidential source development, that's really going to work best when you have something to say to potential sources. People don't want to tell you everything. They want to talk to someone who already knows most of what's going on. But there are really great examples of this kind of reporting. I would especially commend the markup and advise people go and look at how they used community reporting tools to then work out what private companies have been doing. There are some really good examples.
Okay, we've just about run out of time. So, oh, yeah, sorry, excuse me.
So should we address something we discussed before about people who are not quite familiar with tech stuff and
Go on then, let's do it.
How they can get involved? Well, I think that's quite nice.
Let's do it.
I mean, it's been an ongoing topic about journalists and how important it is to have this technical expertise to get involved into this AI stuff, right? And I mean, I don't know, if we're being honest, journalists are not experts in anything, right? Or some journalists. Okay, let's speak about me. So I mean, this is no excuse for not dealing with matters like climate change or stuff that's really, complex and stuff like that. There's way to I don't know if we have time to deal with this, but there's way to mitigate that. And I don't think this is a reason that if you find a subject that's really important, that there's no ways to both you, like through studying and consulting experts you trust, and consulting other journalists who you again trust, doing your research and getting into it, but not get intimidated by the fact that you perhaps are not aware of any programming language or algorithm is something that you think is I don't know, an extraterrestrial planet. Yeah.
But how do you
and ask
explain
for
this?
help.
Sorry.
No, and ask for help. I mean,
Yeah, ask
people
for
that-
help. Exactly. Exactly. This is what we've been doing all along. I mean, none of us. I mean, this is why we have those cross-border collaborations in the first place, because everyone brings something to the table that other people don't. Well, hopefully you're all working for gigantic, multi-billion organization, which are benign actors. But if that's not the case, then maybe just collaborative journalism and find people who can help you out with this. Just don't feel threatened about it, and do your homework. And that's my 2 cents. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a very good message to end on. So thank you very much to Pierluigi, Pablo, Georgos, and Daniel. Really fascinating discussion. Thank you to the audience.